Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Liberti with a special thank you for being here, and also a very special thank you to Marilyn Guard and the folks at ClinicPRO. I've come to know Marilyn, and I can tell you that her heart truly is for our profession, and I always appreciate that, and I thank her. You know, whether you're a recent graduate or if you've been practicing for 37 years or more as myself, personal injury is definitely a very viable place to be. It's a business within your business, a practice within your practice, and it's our intention that we can enhance your ability to attract attorney attention, to gain extra referrals, to increase your visibility, momentum, and overall respect in the community, as we are going to begin to show you what can be done in that area using Zeus. Many people use Zeus on the initial visit and the discharge visit, and then stay with the ClinicPRO software on all those visits in between. You can use Zeus initially, which will help us to place the patient in the diagnostic-related estimate category, and then at the discharge, which will accumulate all of the values that Colossus will use to determine a range of the case's worth. So let's get started now without wasting any more time. Thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Liberti. Be sure to join us on our webinars, and especially look for my webinar, what are the 5 most important things to do to gain an attorney referral?
I believe that personal injury is definitely the best place to be for chiropractors, and at this time. Of course, we do have some adversaries. You know what they are. They're the insurance companies, the use of their claims handling softwares as Colossus. There are actually 79 other softwares that are similar to Colossus. They all operate on the same principles, which we'll discuss today. And, of course, we've got 13 unfair claims acts we'll talk about. And then we've got the adjusters and the IMEs who continue to have varying opinions, and Zeus is going to solve all these litigation obstacles, as we are about to see. Well, personal injury today really is versus Colossus versus the insurers. Australia gave birth to Colossus. Colossus was the first software that makes settlement determinations. There are now 80 different versions, but they all operate off the same set of factors, and they all operate on the same formula to convert those factors into settlement valuation. But in Australia, the government is the one that pays or makes the payouts for bodily injury claims and auto accidents. When they realized how much money they were actually paying out, they wanted to find a way to literally reduce bodily injury payouts. They brought in a company who created Colossus. Australia gave birth to Colossus. Why that's significant is because Australia operates on a different set of guidelines. Colossus operates on a different set of guidelines. They actually operate on their own guidelines. They are independent. They are third party. They're born now of the insurance companies. And Colossus was not based on the United States Government Center for Medicare Service guideline. So when you're operating in the United States using a government electronic health record program based on Center for Medicare Service guidelines, you're not interfacing and exchanging value into Colossus. That's the big problem. So since Australia works differently than the U.S., after discovering the huge success and savings by Colossus, Allstate actually bought Colossus from its programmers and migrated it to America. It's been estimated that Colossus now saves insurers an average of $200 million annually in injury claim payouts. So there's significant savings. Now, in America, the Consumer Federation of America says now all of our nation's top insurers are using claims handling softwares as Colossus, but they're using it in ways that put millions of American consumers at risk of not getting the claims payments that they paid for with their premiums. They go on to say, unfortunately, these softwares aid insurance companies to violate their own obligation to deliver fair claims payments to their own policyholders on a huge scale, all in order to increase profits. In fact, superior courts have ruled these softwares are harmful to public interest, and Allstate agreed to pay a $10 million regulatory fine for unfair claims acts and unfair settlement practices related to the use of those softwares. I want to start briefly to let you know there are actually, in addition to Colossus, there are actually insurance claims acts that have been given names by the insurers. They're unfair. There's 13 of them. They're not criminal, but they are unfair. The significant ones I want to mention to you that are being used against you are, number one, an insurance claims act called manipulating the trauma line. It's important for two reasons. One, Most of us don't even know what the trauma lines consist of, so we can't tell when they're being manipulated. And two, the insurance companies are using an average of 3 of these unfair insurance claims acts on every one of your cases. So it could be that they are manipulating the trauma line. Many of these are similar. I'll go over the one that's number 2, which is called dragging the injury severity point. They will actually drive the severity of an injury down to a lower value. I'll give you an example. If you have a bulging disc or a herniated disc, but you do not use the specific language that says the bulge or the hernia puts pressure on the thecal sac or spinal cord, then the adjusters will drag the injury severity point of that herniated or bulging disc down to the value that's equal to 2 muscle spasms. They will significantly drag the injury severity point down to a lower value. Sometimes they reduce the severity of an injury so they don't even rate it, which is number 3, reduced severity non-rate action plan. They will actually reduce the severity of an injury so that it's non-rateable. And they named it the Reduced Severity Non-Rate Action Plan. It's pretty bold. They're not even afraid to hide their unfair claims acts. Next, we have benchmark tuning bias, and that's where they take an accumulated summary of all of the settlements that were given in a particular zip code over a year. Then they will do what's called a plot on a scatter graph, where they show all of the values that were assembled. They'll eliminate the lows and eliminate the highs and come up with a midline, and they'll make sure that for that zip code, they'll never pay over the lowest of the average in that zip code for the past year, called benchmark tuning bias. The one that I really love is what they call core claim process redesign. In core claim process redesign, it does just what it says. It goes to the core of how they process claims and redesigns it. And in that redesign, they will devalue a claim by 1/2 to 2/3. And then we've got what they call second-guessing medical opinions, and that's when adjusters blatantly second-guess your opinion, and also when IMEs second-guess your opinion. So we're faced with a lot of obstacles when we're dealing with personal injury claims, and Zeus is here to overcome those obstacles, prevent unfair insurance claims acts, and actually enhance settlement valuation. We have enhanced the value of these claims by an average of 5 times in the past 6 years. Other Colossus obstacles, you've seen them and you deal with them. That's when we have low settlements, when IMEs dispute and cut our fees and deny care, when adjusters deny. For example, if there's low speeds or no property damage, they'll say there's no injury to the occupants. They will deny clinical findings that aren't obvious, or they'll disagree about the degree of impairment, or they'll disagree about injury severity types, or when there are prior accidents or pre-existing conditions, they'll want to blame the current injuries on those priors. The big differences are that the standard electronic health records are based on the United States Government Center for Medicare Service Guidelines, and they're not interfacing with Colossus, and the difference there is that Colossus is from Australia, and it's based on its own set of decision points that determine settlement valuation. Let's take a look at what those decision points are. And this is going to be striking to many of us. There are 14,357 value drivers, 27,125 severity drivers, 26,350 standard multipliers, 33 liability drivers, 15 additional increase multipliers. This equals 67,880 decision points that Colossus is based on. Plus, Colossus uses case maximizers, prolonged modifiers, and injury severity points, and of course, trauma lines. Aaron DeShaw, who is a medical expert and an attorney, he's a chiropractor and an attorney, he says, only a minority of lawyers and doctors have a clue what's going on. Many are unaware of the decision points that are significant and that convey value into a claim. What adjusters do with decision points is this. To use the claim settlement software as Colossus, an adjuster will input data. The data he inputs comes from the decision points. So he'll input data about a claim referred to as decision points, and then Colossus will calculate a range of values for the claim's worth based on the input of those decision points. There's a formula. The process where decision points translate into actual case settlement dollars is called the decision point to dollar percentage multiplier formula. Now, 80% of Colossus decision points are missing in the U.S. government Center for Medicare Service records. What's significant about this is that missing decision points equal missing settlement dollars because there's nothing to convert or translate. The adversaries, again, the insurance companies. Having these Colossus-based softwares in the 70 and other versions makes it difficult. Against those softwares, one cannot really win until now. There are 3 computers that use procedural intelligence to make medical decisions. Watson, that's the famous IBM computer that beat Jeopardy. Watson can assess 22,000 illnesses. Colossus program can evaluate 600 injuries, according to spokesperson Marion Kelly. And Zeus can assess over 300 injury types, those that we see in these typical soft tissue or vehicular crashes. These are the decision points that should be in your SOAP notes. Injury severity points, value drivers, case maximizers, prolonged modifiers, standard multipliers, additional increase multipliers, injury drivers, trauma lines, liability drivers, statements of undisputed facts, memorandum of points. Colossus further requires the injury model assessment. This is part of the quality standards set forth by the courts. The injury model would consist of a whole person impairment, and Colossus is based on the 5th edition AMA guides. So the first thing we have to do is we have to arrive at a whole person impairment based on 5th edition AMA guides. You should give a spine impairment summary. You should use diagnostic-based injury severity types and trauma lines. You should use the diagnostic-related estimate categories. You should rate specific disorders of the spine. You should use the abbreviated injury scale. You should format the impairment rating in a table. You should include the degree of reasonable medical probability for every involved body part, for the prognosis, and for the MMI. You should differentiate between static and stable injuries and assign future care on stable injuries. This is referred to as the injury model. Zeus has the injury model built into its assessment criteria. When you use Zeus, you are performing an injury model assessment. That constitutes a 1191M injury model impairment rating assessment by attending physician for 1 to 3 body systems. You can find that on the website, on the government website, by logging on to this web address. The injury model impairment rating assessment by attending physician, according to the government fee schedules, is $520.22. It's higher than a level 4 examination because it is a special assessment and it does rate the impairment rating by the attending physician. So you can choose to use that code. The Zeus has medical decision-making function. The Zeus medical decision-making was built to assist the chiropractor to complete the injury model, to arrive at all the factors that are necessary to exchange sufficient data into Colossus. So Zeus is programmed with what's called computer-aided decision-making, or CAD, computer-aided decision functionality. Zeus actually has a translation tool that will exchange the above-listed medical data in a semantically interoperable manner. This brings a plug-and-play interoperability to search, tag, and extract fields of decision points among those 300 injuries in 58 injury categories to input valuation into a commercial or Colossus insurance claim. The function includes multi-criteria medical decision-making with compilation and organization of Colossus medical decision point factors to empower you and your records. Zeus will automatically calculate the whole person impairments, and it will cite the addition, chapter, table, and page of the AMA guide. It will place it in the table format required of Colossus, and this will establish the preponderance of evidence and insist you to win the greater weight of the evidence challenges, thus eliminate varying opinions of both the adjuster and the IME. This is a form of ambient or intelligence, linking the physician to the commercial insurance company decision points, assembling evidence-based data through haptic computing or things that think. Such context-aware computing will allow the doctor to interface and interact with the computer so that these decision points are now located and included in your electronic medical records. Zeusclaim's computer-aided decision-making is referred to as a decision support system. This is an adaptive and an evolving information system designed to assemble suitable information when you approach numerous and various medical evaluation, acceptable treatment planning, and control problems that are often complex and complicated in a Colossus commercial insurance environment. The decision support system is meant to implement several of the functions that would normally require a medical support team, otherwise that would be needed to help you, the decision maker, overcome the constraints of commercial insurer guidelines in personal injury cases. This automated decision support system will search, tag, and extract all the commercial Colossus decision points, and it will formulate them in the table, in the correct language, in the format, and the sequence to interface and put value into the commercial insurance Colossus claim. Let me give you one example of the 58 differences between Colossus and Government Center for Medicare Service guides. If you're using standard electronic health records based on Government Center for Medicare Services, we're asked to rate a prognosis, an overall prognosis, which could be good, fair, guarded, poor, or clinically unstable. Colossus does not accept any of those. Colossus wants a prognosis that is based upon the degree of reasonable medical probability from 0 to 100 as to whether or not the individual body part that was involved will continue to show symptoms in the future. But Colossus does not want an overall prognosis. It wants a prognosis for each individual injury. For example, if you have your wrists on a steering wheel and you sprain them during the accident, or you have a floorboard injury where you jam your foot on the brake and sprain your ankle, or you bang your shoulder on a door and you bruise it, or you actually suffer a herniated disc from extension hyperflexion. Each one of those injuries will heal at a different time and a different rate. And so Colossus wants you to show every body part that was involved, a diagnosis for every body part that was involved, a prognosis for every body part that was involved, and an MMI for every body part that was involved, not just a generic prognosis or a generic MMI. So now you're going to take each injury, you're going to give each injury a prognosis, and that prognosis will be either uncertain, possible, probable, or definite, meaning into the future, I'm uncertain or possible or it's very probable or it's definite that this particular injury will continue. They want you to make that prognosis based on a reasonable degree of medical probability from 0 to 100%. So an uncertain prognosis contains a 0 to 25% uncertainty that this problem will persist into the future. If it's possible, there's a 26 to 50% reasonability medically that it will occur into the future. But any conditions, any diagnoses, any prognoses that have a greater than 50% chance of occurring into the future will be given a probable cause, meaning 51 to 75% reasonable medical probability of continuing, or definite 76 to 100% reasonable medical probability of continuing. For example, if you have alteration of motor segment integrity, AOMSI injury, Colossus actually allows treatment for that condition for 3 years. So that injury, ligament tear, ligament laxity in the cervical or lumbar spine, would have a definite prognosis with a 76 to 100% definite reasonable medical probability chance of continuing to occur, according to Colossus, for up to 3 years. So not only do we have to make the prognoses according to Colossus terms, but we have to make a prognosis for each body part. And then you have to understand what injury severity type does your bodily injury fall into. There are 5 different categories, and Colossus has already determined how much future care they will allow depending upon the injury type. Rather than explain all that now, let me just say it's all built into Zeus. Zeus will recognize the injuries, the injury type. Zeus will even make the diagnoses. Zeus will assign the degree of reasonable medical probability. Zeus will assign the impairment rating. Zeus will put it in a table format, and it will do it all automatically. That's the computer-aided decision function. I believe personal injury is the most viable business for chiropractors. In the average community, there are 2,500 accident victims that are going to seek a physician's care every month. If you had 0.5% increase in that market share, that would equate to 12 new personal injury patients a month. Do the math, the average case fee, $5,000 times 12 new patients a month, $60,000 times 12 months is $720,000 a year, with just a 0.5% increase in your market share. Chiropractors are the best suited to treat personal injury cases with our clinical background. With Zeus, you now have the unique selling proposition and enhanced core competence to actually increase overall medical legal respect within your community as you solve these problems and enhance settlement valuation. What do you get when you combine the power of Zeus with EasyBiz? You get a higher case valuation. Obviously, this will lead to more attorney referrals. You get a way to counter Colossus. You have a way to prevent the 13 unfair insurance company claims tactics. You can eliminate the varying medical opinions of the adjusters and the IMEs. You can now establish the preponderance or the veracity of injuries. You can show that your findings have more believability. You can win the greater weight of the evidence challenges and eliminate varying opinions, and you can enhance settlement valuation. As I said, Zeus has been enhancing valuation by an average of 5 times over the past 6 years. Before we look at Zeus, I want to give you another important topic, and that's narratives. According to attorney Colossus expert Aaron Deshaw and several others, and those who have written books on Colossus, narratives are no longer admissible. The insurance companies not only created Colossus, they created Business Processing Improvement, or BPI. And in the Business Processing Improvement, they made other changes to how personal injury should be operated. And one of them is that narratives are no longer admissible. Now, attorney Colossus expert Aaron Deshaw tells us, while the medical and legal profession has historically used narratives to convey claim information, since the development of Business Process Improvement, or BPI, much of the information provided in the narrative has no value in Colossus. They go on to further tell us that the adjusters are strictly required to only go by, injury-wise, what information is in the medical SOAP records, not in a narrative. If it is not in the medical records, then they are not even allowed to consider it. The medical data that is in your SOAP notes is referred to as a triggering factor. And the only place the adjuster is permitted to acquire data about the injury claim is in the medical records, not the narrative. Attorney Stephen Burris from Las Vegas says if it's not in the medical records, it doesn't count. Stupid rule, but that's apparently how it's done. So, the narratives are not the only thing that are no longer admissible and will not convey value, but reports. Not just narrative reports, MRI reports, radiographic reports, they are no longer admitted as evidence. All the evidence and all the reports, even lab reports, must be transferred to the medical files and placed in the SOAP notes, where the adjusters can then extract those triggering factors and input them for value. I'll give you an example. If an MRI says you have a herniated disc, the doctor must take that herniated disc. In Zeus, there's a section for herniated or bulging discs. When you enter that there is a herniated disc in present, you'll take the information from the MRI report and you'll plug it into Zeus. Zeus will then place that herniated disc into the appropriate specific disorder of the spine category. It will list the AMA guide table, chapter, and page. It will list the specific disorder categories. It will show where it's a disorder that is claimed specific disorder. It will show the degree of impairment. It will show the effect of lost functioning on duties and address loss of enjoyment. It will convert it into any impairment rating, and it will list the table, the chapter, the page, and the addition of the guides. So the information from labs, from MRI reports, from AOMSI reports, from DRA reports, from CRMA report, any type of report, that information must be taken and placed into your medical records. So Zeus has areas where you'll be able to take all injuries found in all reports and put it into Zeus, where it will assemble it in the right language, format, and sequence, so it does be picked up by the adjuster and be placed into Colossus for valuation. Now, the next thing you need to know is the Business Process Improvement said the information in the SOAP notes must be mirrored in the demand letter, or the adjusters do not have to accept it. This now means the attorney actually has to mirror your SOAP notes word for word for word. Even if you were to say, according to Steve Burris, that your patient can no longer golf. If the attorney does not say the doctor reports the patient can no longer golf, then the adjuster doesn't have to input it. Everything has to be mirrored. There are probably 48 factors that must be mirrored, and only if they are mirrored does the adjuster have to input them. But that's not all. The impairment rating must now be displayed in a table format. So we've found a way for you to get your data to the attorney so he can mirror it in his demand, and Zeus will assemble the impairment rating in the table format. This is what the table format will look like. You must list the body part. Let's go with the first injury, ligament tear, or loss of motion segment integrity, or AOMSI, alteration of motion segment integrity. That's assessed, the impairment is assessed using the 5th edition guides, Chapter 15, Table 15-3A, page 424. Later in the report, we're going to break that down into the degree of impairment and show how it interferes with loss of function, and we're going to show that according to International Class of Functioning as it relates to duties under duress and loss of enjoyment. The next injury is for a unilateral spinal nerve root impairment or loss of strength or muscle weakness. We're going to show that we use the 5th edition guides, Chapter 15, Table 15-16, page 324, and we will go ahead and list the degree of impairment and show again its loss of function according to duties under duress and loss of enjoyment. And you can just go down the list and you'll see that every impairment has to be listed by body part, and then you have to cite the guide edition you're using to determine the impairment, what formula you use, what chapter, what table, what page. Zeus does that and produces this table format, and it will send it to the attorney to include in his demand, and it's all automatic. Resolving a claim favorably today without going to trial is dependent on 3 factors. First is the physician's ability to chart and document the decision points in the SOAP notes. Then there's the lawyer's ability to mirror those SOAP notes in the demand, and then there's the ability to format the whole person impairment into a table. So Zeus is designed to interface into Colossus. Now, since the only place an adjuster is permitted to gather decision point data, called triggering factors, is in the medical file, and narrative reports are no longer admissible as evidence, and mirroring is required, and table formatting is required, the Zeus system solves these problems. It will search, tag, and assemble the decision points. It will put it into the table format. It will use the right language, format, and sequence. It will create the impairment rating. It will list the table, chapter, page, and formula of the AMA guides. It will then send the file to the attorney electronically so that he can mirror the SOAP notes, show the impairment table as evidence, and prevent the varying opinions, and actually enhance claim settlement value. The way we've set it up, attorneys are saving 50% of their legal time and spend by using Zeus over their normal system of producing a demand. Because Zeus is going to help the attorney produce the demand. We created Zeusclaim for the medical doctor and Zeus demand for the attorney, just so the attorney could mirror the doctor's files, have an impairment rating that's in a table format, and interface into Colossus. So there will be no more narratives, no more paper. The doctor will actually send a code to the attorney that will allow the attorney to access the patient medical file from the Zeus Cloud storage system, and when he does, it will mirror the SOAP notes and automatically assemble them for the attorney into the correct language, format, and sequence, so that the attorney has the ability to exchange all the sufficient Colossus data, interface it, and input added value into a Colossus claim. No more inadmissible narratives. This is what saves you and the attorney time and money by mirroring triggering point factors that interface with Colossus to enhance settlement value, by creating the impairment rating, by placing it into a table format, and by understanding the decision points, searching, tagging, and including them. Now, this is just a brief checklist of the topics of decision points that will appear in your SOAP notes when you're using Zeus. Zeus will search, tag, and extract the value drivers, the injury severity points, the prolonged modifiers, the case maximizers, the standard multipliers, the additional increase multipliers, the liability drivers, the injury drivers, the trauma lines, the statements of undisputed facts, the memorandum of points, the declarations, and it will cite authorities. Of course, there are other things that you have to produce for the attorney and put into your SOAP notes. The functional physical exam, the injury types by ICDs, documented symptoms, lab tests, special tests like the alteration of motion segment integrity, and an x-ray for the uncinate process, which can fracture when there are oblique forces or when the head is turned. The upward lateral projections of the vertebrae, usually at C4 and C5, are prone to so much G-forces when the head is turned that even an 8.2 mile per hour accident that doesn't produce property damage can fracture a vertebrae. We'll get into that in a minute. I'll show you how to do these special tests. Then, of course, all your diagnostics. In a Colossus claim, you are allowed to show sensory involvement by only two procedures: monofilaments or NCV or EMG, not by pinwheel. So monofilaments can be purchased for $49.50, a set of 5, but if you want to convert your sensory loss into an impairment, no longer can use a pinwheel. It's either a monofilament, an NCV, or an EMG. So when we talk about diagnostic procedures later, we're going to show you what you can do to meet the criteria of the injury model and have these injuries converted into impairments to add the value. Any specialist evaluations must be included. Medical determinations must be included. Diagnoses must be in double digits. 10 or more diagnoses are required in order to Colossus to accept it, or you'll find that Colossus can just click a button and downgrade the entire value by up to 20%. When you rate the symptoms and complaints, you have to show the intensity, the frequency, the type, the radiation, and the further effects it's got on functioning. Duties under duress is worth 25% of the medical claim. Loss of enjoyment is worth 25% of the medical claim. Obviously, you'll show your treatment. You have to show for each injury which are stable, which are static, which require future treatment by the process known as medical determination. You need a prognosis overall, but as I said, you need a prognosis for each body area. You need a future treatment plan, which includes the number of visits, future treatment duration, timeline, and frequency. You need MMI overall, but you also need an MMI for each body part, as I explained before. The whole person impairment rating carries a 25% value of the entire claim, but a chiropractor's impairment rating is not admissible in a Colossus claim, not accepted by Colossus, so you must send it out to a medical doctor who will provide you with a validation letter. More about that in a moment. You have to show evidentiary burdens of proof that the soft tissue injuries meet, quote, serious injury threshold types. You must also supply statements of undisputed facts, diagnostic-related estimate categories, diagnostic-based injuries. You must show a spine impairment summary, and we're chiropractors, so we should show an impairment summary of the spine. And then, of course, you must list specific disorders of the spine, and obviously a whole person impairment rating. And, of course, finally, you will obviously be able to include the medical history, both past and current, medical office records, hospital office records, records from any other sources, including the client. And if there's a delay in seeking care greater than 14 days from the date of the accident, or a gap in treatment that lasts more than 5 days, you've got to use special language, or Colossus will downgrade your value by 20%. There are administrative, legal, and economic decision points the lawyers have to be aware of, but Zeus is going to give them a template to plug in monetary damages, property damages, additional property losses, current medical costs, future medical costs, the probability and the need for future medical care, economic losses, vehicle repair costs, car rental expenses, miles that have to be driven to maintain properties of the case, like going to the doctor, going to the therapist, going to the lawyer, going to the auto body shop, current income loss, any future income loss, the total of all economic loss, and then supply supportive statements and costs and losses. Zeus is going to give the attorney language from our language library that has been designed to compel the adjusters to input the actual decision points and not omit, deny, dispute, or discount them. Remember, missing decision points will mean missing settlement value. Now, let's talk about the chiropractor and the whole person impairment. Yes, the impairment rating carries a 25% value of the entire medical claim and must be part of a Colossus claim filing. But Colossus will not accept an impairment rating from a chiropractor, so you must send your file out for an independent third-party medical doctor's validation and submit a validation report. This process is referred to by the courts as independent medical validation, or IMV. An IMV, independent medical validation, overrides an IME, independent medical examination. So now when you do send your file out for an IMV, you will override the IME, eliminate all those different opinions, because the courts came up with this process of IMV to show that one opinion, one only, will carry the greater weight. One only will have more believability. That's the one that has a stamp that it was independently medically validated. Insurance will pay you to send the file out for an IMV. The impairment rating carries a 25% value of the entire medical claim, and your rating is not accepted. So courts have come up with an authoritative process called IMV, where you send your file to an independent third medical party to validate. No doctor of any specialty can validate his own findings. It requires a third independent party. Colossus also gives a higher value when you bring in a second opinion. Insurers will pay for the IMV. You will profit $200 when you bill for the IMV. The IMV will give you the greater weight of the evidence. The attorneys will greatly appreciate it, and it will eliminate and replace the narrative, saving time. The IMV is the key to this program. You'll be able to just click and send your file at one click of a button. At the end of your SOAP notes, you'll see it, where you can click, and the file will be sent to an independent medical validation company where it will be scrubbed and the decision points will be plotted. All the factors will be assembled in the correct language, format, and sequence to interface into Colossus, input added value, and eliminate varying opinions. Now, there are certain injuries that have significantly high value. Zeus will detect their presence with its computer-aided decision functionality. For example, the alteration of motion segment integrity, the ligament laxity, has a set-aside value by Colossus of $66,000. Most people, including attorneys, don't know it, and when that injury is present, they don't get that much. So not only will Zeus detect that injury, but Zeus will use the language that will compel the adjuster to pay the set-aside predetermined value that Colossus has established for that injury. And the IMV report will override IME and adjuster disputes. Click and send function makes it so easy. Zeusclaim is designed to be user-friendly and very helpful. With 6 years of successful use and software improvements, there are 7 levels of help. So I want to go to Zeus now and show you how the main menu allows you to select help options. The patient menu will give you help options. A question mark enables you to walk through the SOAP note screen and gives a brief explanation of each section. We have a flyover help tutorial. You put the mouse over anything you don't understand, it'll bring up a tutorial. We have color-coded areas so that they explain their value to you. And if you still need help, you can call the help desk. You can go to the direct phone number. You can consider this. Many users have been using Zeus for 6 years, and we get very few calls because people can and do understand and use the Zeus system. When you submit a case for validation, you get all the help you need. If there's anything that had been missed in that case, when it's sent out for IMV, they will get back to you and let you know, and everything can be upgraded. Zeusclaim can do this. It can generate SOAP notes in the best format that will interface and work with Colossus. It can send a simplified duties and address, loss of enjoyment questionnaire to the patient by email, where they can fill it out in their own experience and then click, and it'll dump right back into your SOAP notes in the right place, in the right format, in the right sequence. Zeusclaim can coordinate any additional medical experts into your files, and Zeusclaim will send a link to the attorney where the attorney can fill out his own data. Zeusclaim can help generate the demand letter for the attorney that will fully interface the SOAP notes into Colossus for value. Zeusclaim will generate the medical validation letter that interfaces with the attorney letter to put value into Colossus. And if you still have any problems with the case and the insurance companies ignore you, Zeusclaim will generate a rebuttal to which the insurer and the adjuster must respond. And at that point, they usually will arrive at a fair and equitable settlement valuation. Since we know the values that Colossus assigns when we send our files to the attorney, we're plugging them into the injury calculator that Colossus uses, and we're telling the attorney this is what Colossus should offer for these medical injuries. When Colossus offers left, Zeus will detect it, and it will show that these were the unfair claims acts that were used, or that these were the violations of the ethics codes of adjuster, and it will produce a rebuttal the attorney can send that will compel them to reassess and enhance value. So let's just review Zeus at this time. Okay, here's the main screen. Okay, what I want to point out to you is this button that says start here. That's a good place to start. That's another tutorial similar to the one that I'm doing now, but it's a lot longer. That tutorial is 80 minutes. You can watch it 10 minutes at a time. One of the reasons is because if you'll see here, this is the clinical manual. There are going to be injuries like alteration of motion segment integrity, uncinate process fracture, mild traumatic brain injuries, anxiety impairments, sleep disorder impairments. Many injuries are going to exist, and the clinical manual will explain to you how to diagnose a brachial plexus lesion or axillary nerve injury or radiculopathies. There are 300 injury types that Zeus recognizes, and the clinical manual will walk you through so you understand them. Okay. Here's a quick start manual you can print. These are the three main features that Zeusclaim has to counter Colossus, but the tutorial screen and Colossus walkthrough is right here. Start here. In addition, up to the top right, you see a question mark. If you hit that, this will up a screen walkthrough. It will walk you through any part of the screen that you want help with. If we're dealing with the difference between a stable and a static injury and you want help, click that question mark, and the screen walkthrough will explain to you what is the difference between static and stable. If you want to know how to assign individual prognoses, individual MMI, how to assess reasonable medical probability, click that question mark, and the screen walkthrough will walk you through. There are 26 sections in Zeus. You can have a screen walkthrough for any and every section by clicking that button. Now, when you first start, you're going to add a new patient. If you already have patients added in there and you just want to come back the next day and use Zeus, just click on Patient Find. You can click on Patient List and select a patient, or click on Patient Find, type in the name of a patient. I'll give you an example. Let's click on Patient Find. When it comes up, I'm going to type in sample. All I have to do is start the first couple of words like SAM. It'll pull up everything that's got SAM in it, and we'll go to this one, Frank the sample. Click on Find, and it will pull up Frank the sample. Click on it, and here you'll have a menu item on the left, and also if you hold the mouse over the patient's name, left click on it, it'll pull up another set of menus. So I want to go and show you a little bit about Zeus so you can see what it looks like. Okay. I'm pulling up a administrator screen, so you'll just be pulling up your SOAP notes. We're just going to start with the diagnoses. Now, if you'll look at here, and I'm going to be very brief, it starts with the head, the first place that we have injuries. So let's just say you want to know more about concussions. Hold the mouse over that, and it'll bring up all the research. But I just want to point out to you how thorough this is, and then I'll let you figure this out on your own when you get it. Hold the mouse over, and it'll bring up a pop-up screen. Basically, we know when there are 5 G units of force of acceleration, there's a 50% probability of a cerebral contusion and a 99% probability of one of 4 different types of cerebral concussions. At 8.2, rear end impact causes 5 Gs of energy to dissipate to the occupants of the vehicle, and that's enough to produce cerebral contusion 50% of the cases and concussion in 90% of the cases. That's research which you can see and look up, but I also want you to know an 8.2 rear end collision was the speed they used to do the research. It was done at auto crash injury research centers, and all the research is available for you right here. You can see from the Institute of Transportation and Traffic Engineering, from orthopedic surgery at School of Medicine at Yale. All of our research is here for you. The reason I point this out is because concussions exist 99.9% of the time, and we miss them. So Zeus is going to build in a post-traumatic concussion questionnaire based on the AMA guides. It will not let you miss it. It will ask the patient questions in the symptoms and complaints section. And if we determine that there is a concussion, Zeus will then determine whether or not it's local or widespread, whether it's a behavioral or an emotional concussion, or cognitive, somatic, or psychological concussion, or physical concussion. Zeus will then enter these check marks all by itself if you want it to, or you can do it yourself. If you have the computer-aided decision function on, Zeus will do all of this based on your exams and the patient inputs on complaints and symptoms. Okay? Color coding tells you, okay, this is the section on mild traumatic brain injuries, closed head injuries, cerebral contusions, and concussions. These will probably be filled out in the future on 99.9% of your accident cases. So the first section is just diagnosis. You'll see that we're going to have diagnosed for emotions, anxiety, predominant disturbances, fatigue, sleep disturbances. These come from Colossus. I said Colossus can rate 600 injuries, and Zeus will rate 300 of the ones that are the most common. So we're going to interface, we're going to use Colossus guides. There shows the incident process fracture. If you want to know what that is, hold a mouse over it. I'll briefly explain this to you, just so you know you're going to learn several new things. when the head is turned, looking into the rearview mirror inside the car, outside the car, there's an oblique angle of the neck. Now, the neck can go forward and backward to a 120-degree arc without any injury, but it can only go sideways 35 degrees. So if you're hit from the side, or if you're hit from the rear but your head is turned, the oblique forces will actually expend onto the upward lateral projections of the cervical vertebrae. Those are called the articular pillars, the uncinate process. And they can't take forces greater than 5 Gs, which occurs at 8.2 miles per hour, which isn't even enough to damage the vehicle. And so what happens is the tip of the articular pillar and uncinate process actually fracture. That injury is overlooked the majority of the time because it takes 2 months to show and x-rays are taken on the initial visit. So we're going to show you what kind of x-ray to take to see that and when you should take it. And when that is positive, it's the full case settlement reserve. They have to pay the full value. So Zeus is going to help you to locate all the injuries that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. Come down here to this next one in yellow. It says evidence-based data reveals the disc produces pressure on the thecal sac spinal cord. This section in blue represents hernias and bulges. But if you don't have this sentence, that evidence-based data reveals the disc produces pressure on the thecal sac spinal cord, that's when the adjusters will drag the injury severity point down, and that disc will have the value of 2 muscle spasms, and it won't bring any money. Again, just hold the mouse over, and it'll give you the explanation. Okay, so I think you get the gist of it. So the first section is on diagnoses. Spinal stenosis is very important. Radiculopathy is very important. Contusions of the collagen tissue and dense connective tissue are important. Colossus understands that if you're going to have injury to a muscle, or deeper, a ligament, or deeper, a disc, or deeper, a nerve, you've got to first have dense connective or collagen tissue, so you have to get used to diagnosing contusions, finding sensory impairments, motor impairments, deep tendon responses that are diminished. The AMA guides tells us that the very first thing we're going to see is sensory impairment in the high 80th percentile. Then we'll see a diminished deep tendon response in the high 70th percentile. Then we'll see motor weakness in the low 70th percentile. So you're going to be looking for these things. You'll be looking for laxity of cervical ligament, the AOMSI injury right here. When you click that, Zeus will put these injuries into the specific disorders of the spine. It will assign an impairment. It will list the AMA guide table, chapter, page, and formula. It will put it in the table format. So Zeus becomes very useful for personal injury practitioners. The ones in yellow carry more weight and more significance. Now, radiculopathy is very important. Here you see grams of weight because Colossus will only accept a sensory deficit if you use monofilaments, NCV, or EMG. Most of us don't have EMG or NCV, so spend $49.50 to get a set of monofilaments. Another thing that's important is your motor impairment. So you have to use an electronic muscle tester. If you don't, you're going to miss tremendous value in the claim. And here's the scale for using deep tendon reflexes, which you should find almost every time you find a sensory impairment. Then we're getting into spinal compression testing because these provocative movers will evaluate the presence of radiculopathy. The AMA says if you have a spinal compression test positive, you can use the diagnosis radiculopathy. You must find the presence of radiculopathy on the initial visit, or you cannot make DRE category 3, and you must get into DRE category 3 to have any value. So initially we're going to do a sensory test and spinal compression test to find that radiculopathy, not radiculitis, not radiculalgia, on the initial visit. Then we're going to rate specific disorders of the spine. Compression fracture of the vertebrae, disc bulge, disc hernia, stenosis, narrowing of the canal spaces, and the uncinate process vertebral derangement fracture are specific disorders. Then we're going to run impairment evaluation according to AMA guides. This shows loss of motion and segment integrity. This shows sensory impairment. This shows motor impairment. This shows TMJ. This shows anxiety. This shows sleep disorders. You don't have to worry about this section. Zeus will do this automatically. Zeus will do section 3C and 3D automatically. Then there's simply complaints. Now, the more you give us intensity, frequency, type, radiation, further effects, the more value. These are called prolonged modifiers. So use the scales that are given to you and just fill them out. Each time you or the patient fills these out, it's worth more value. There's a section on complaints, very simple to navigate through. Color-coded them. These purple colors represent the sensory impairment levels and the disturbances of skin and the paresthesias. Red is for cerebral contusion. Anything below it indicates what could constitute a cerebral contusion, like disorientation, unsteadiness, so on and so forth. In blue are the physical concussion symptoms. In purple are the cognitive, somatic, psychological concussions. In green are the behavioral and emotional concussions. Now we've got anxiety factors and all the other factors, including stomach disorders, weight loss, balance disorders, visual disturbance, malaise, lethargy, fatigue, sensitivity, noise, tiredness, sleep disorders, loss of interest, change of habits, eating habits, sleeping habits, recreational interest, enjoyment of life, intolerance to alcohol, working with others, co-workers, children, family matters. Okay, then we're rating the muscle. Here we're going to do activities of daily living to show the scale that these things actually interfere with activity. Now we're going to list duties under duress. These are the ones that Colossus will assign value to. If they're not valuable, we don't include them. Now we're going to show the treatment, very simple, and we're going to show prescriptions. You must make prescriptions. I don't care if you recommend bed rest. You must make prescriptions. There's a list of all you can prescribe. You must make referrals. I don't care if you refer for a DRMA to see the alteration of motion segment integrity, or if you refer for a muscle test, or if you refer for rest, just as long as you make a referral. Then there are immobility devices. If you do not brace, rest, ice compress, elevate, wrap, strap, or tape a Colossus injury, they will deduct at least 20% of the value of the claim, because Colossus says all these injuries, musculoskeletal, neurological, strain, sprain, must be supported with an immobility device. Rest it, ice it, compress it, elevate it, brace it, wrap it, strap it, tape it. If anything, just get yourself some of those kinesiological tapes and begin taping. Now you've got to assign stability for the condition. Hold the mouse over to tell you which cases constitute which amount of time to become stable, or let Colossus do it for you until you become familiar with the stability of the condition. Now you've got to make a medical determination to need a future care based on Colossus guides. Again, you can hold the mouse over it, or you can let Colossus make the decision. This is the section for overall prognosis. This sentence should be everywhere. The prognosis should always be ongoing complaints with ongoing treatment required. But here are lots of categories you can make prognosis. Read them until you're familiar with them. Karnofsky replaces Oswestry. Then you're going to give a prognosis for each body area very simply. It's either going to be uncertain, possible, probable, or definite that the body part involved will occur into the future. And then you're going to assign a future treatment plan for those cases. Whenever there's a grade 3 or a grade 4, look at this. Colossus has already determined what you can do into the future. You don't have to study these or learn these. You can press the computer-aided decision button and Zeus will do it for you. I'm just reviewing. Future treatment recommendations you'll make. Now, when you come up with future treatments, to say 30 visits, you charge $45 a visit, that's $1,350. 30 visits on modalities, you charge $135, that's $4,050. You think there's going to be another $400 worth of other testing, that's a total of $4,440. The insurance company must issue a check for that future care. So look at all the value you're adding. So you'll have to get used to assigning future care. Now, even though a grade 4 injury will acquire future care that can occur 107 times up to 2 years, and that would be if you had ligament tear, you don't have to assign 107 visits. You can assign 30 visits. But you're going to need to do future care. This is the MMI for each body part. It's simple. It's either going to be stable or static. We have an instructional tutorial to tell you the difference between stable and static, but basically I will say this. Use this to reference this. If a person has had a massive coronary and he's in intensive care, but he's stable, that's good. That means we can keep working on him. We have hope. We can reduce it from increasing in severity. We can keep him comfortable. But if they say he had a massive coronary, he's static. That's bad. That means nothing can help. So when you can't help, discharge MMI. When you can help, call it stable. You can still discharge and still treat into the future and still sign an MMI. Next section is the impairment rating. If you don't understand DRE categories, Zeus will do it automatically. If you want to learn it, you can take our tutorials online. This is the range of motion model if we're using that model. This is the whole body summary, and these are the evidentiary conclusions, and I would strongly suggest you read them. Okay? And let me give you an example. Diagnostic testing of radiographic mensuration, according to AMA guides, was used to establish the presence of AOMSI in this patient. According to the former superintendent of insurance at Allstate, James Mathis, a diagnosis of ligament laxity AOMSI signs a case settlement value reserve of $66,000. In order to substantiate the veracity of injuries, this claim has undergone the process of independent medical validation. Now let me show you what happens. When it goes for the process of independent medical validation, at the end of your claim, click this button, Request Medical Validation. Request Medical Validation. It'll electronically send your case out. And then you will get this report. And this will be about a 12, 15 page report. And that report will look like this. It will be the independent medical validation. It's for settlement discovery purposes. You don't have to e-file this in court, but you will send it to the insurance company, the adjuster, the supervisor, the IME, and any administrators and all parties and attorneys of record. It says, take notice, the process of independent medical validation with medical determination, including memorandum of points, statements of undisputed facts, declarations, exhibits, and authorities, are intended to present evidentiary burdens of proof in admissible format to establish the preponderance, to eliminate varying medical opinions, to show the greater weight of the evidence. One of its purposes is to produce enough evidence-based data by one side to create a belief that its version is more likely true. Now watch this. If such evidence-based data comes under dispute by adjuster or IME, the dispute must show the finding to be so against the great weight and preponderance of the evidence that it's clearly wrong and manifestly unjust. So, they would have to show that the AMA guides was wrong. This is the introductory language that goes to the adjuster to show the statements of undisputed facts, the evidentiary burdens of proof of regulatory requirements, the declarations, how you establish the preponderance, the memorandum of points, the authorities, all the factors that are being analyzed, and then this is the actual report itself with a red stamp. And I just want to point out to you that this will rate the specific disorders of the spine, and it will create the table. Okay? So we're looking good, doing good, being strong, solving problems. And now I want to show you one last thing. You will be able to send this to the attorney. In 1 second for it to pull up. This is what you send to the attorney. In the beginning of this file includes that language I told you the attorney can use to compel the adjuster to input and not dispute and not deny and not omit and not discount. And then here it is, your records. Everything that you just did is going to appear in that attorney file. But watch this bonus. The attorney doesn't have to read, doesn't have to do anything. He just clicks this button, and then it'll bring up the attorney's sections that he can input. The liability. What did the accident report say? What did the police officer say? What was the property damage? What are the medical expenses? What were the income loss, the mileage costs? What are the future medical expenses? What are the total of economic losses? What are the evidentiary conclusions? What language we're going to use? And what kind of settlement demand are we going to make? Zeus will tell the attorney what the case is worth by using the injury calculator that Colossus uses. Your attorney can then just click this button. By entering that data, clicking that button, it will produce the demand letter for him, saving him significant time. They will love you because you've just given him a software to save 50% of his legal time and spend, produce a narrative that will generate higher income, eliminate varying opinions. His letterhead will go up here, and now you've just assisted him to produce a demand that will convey great weight and evidence into Colossus. All your data transferred like this. There's the table. You've done the best that you could do in personal injury to be the best evaluator you could possibly be. So, I want to say that it's been my pleasure to review this with you. This is just the very beginning. I wanted to give you a quick overview. You've got your screen share tutorial. You use that screen share tutorial, and you can view that. You can watch it. You can watch the videos. Every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we hold a webinar for all the Zeus users nationwide. We have recorded video tutorials online based upon every clinical component, based upon every Zeus component. You'll have so much help. Remember I said there are 7 ways to get help, including the direct line and the help desk. Okay, what do we do next? Let's give Zeus a try. Let's get started right now and take your personal injury practice to the highest level possible with Zeus. When attorneys recognize your ability to solve their problems and enhance settlement evaluation, they are going to make consistent and predictable referrals to you. The first thing to do is click on the button below to get started with Zeusclaim today. Then, select your first PI patient. This should be one who either has recently been discharged and not yet settled, or a PI patient that is ready to discharge. Remember, narratives will no longer be necessary. The Zeus SOAP notes representing the last visit and the validation report will replace the narrative. Once you select a personal injury patient, you want to transfer that patient claim from EasyBiz into Zeusclaim. You'll be able to use the help functions that exist in Zeus. If you hold the mouse over any areas that you want more clarification on, the tooltips will pop up and give you an explanation. Or if you're at the menu page and you click on the question mark icon at the top right hand of the menu page, you'll get a screen share walkthrough. You can also contact the Zeus help desk or call directly. When you've transferred the patient data into Zeus, click on the icon at the end of the SOAP notes to submit the file for medical validation. We will review your file and make any edits or additions that are necessary, so you don't have to be perfect. If you want to engage the Zeus computer-aided decision-making button, click on the icon on the menu page, and Zeus will automatically assemble the case in the correct language, format, and sequence to exchange sufficient data and input added value into Colossus. We will then transfer and assist you to send the entire Zeus file through the clouds to the attorney so they can get started to generate the demand letter. By doing these steps, it's the best way to learn the Zeus system. This will give you the reality of actually flowing a file through the Zeus system. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can make the mistakes because when you submit it for validation, we will make the corrections and contact you to go over it. Many doctors use Zeus on only the first and last visits. You can use Zeus on the initial and discharge visits alone, as long as Zeus is used on the initial and discharge visit. It's not going to benefit you to delay or to study documentation or to study Zeus in order to become an expert at Zeus. The best way to learn is to jump right in and select a personal injury patient and make the entries into Zeus on actual PI patients, as that's the best way to quickly learn as you go. Zeusclaim is there so you don't have to study everything before you use it, so you can get started right away and it will guide you in the right directions. Let's change the way we do personal injury to eliminate varying opinions, prevent unfair claims acts and low settlements, and increase our overall respect within the medical legal community. Just click on the button below to get started with Zeusclaim today.